So what was
bit
your
better.
impression of Fritz? How did Fritz come across?
So first of all, the performance I thought was the strongest one.
Amazing.
Like what's
Holt McCallany.
Holt McCallany. I thought was amazing in this, and maybe it was like sort of the juiciest part as well. Like just kind of the overbearing father. Maybe one of the bigger, louder characters.
This was an outstanding casting, like the best of I think all of them. Like he just took to this role incredibly well.
I left coming out of the movie feeling very conflicted about how I feel about Fritz, and I don't know if you agree, John, because I feel the film certainly leans towards placing blame on Fritz for causing several of his family members' passings. Through either building up expectations for David to continue the tour of Japan, or for rushing Mike in as a replacement for David, or by neglecting Kevin's cries to help Carrie. That was probably pretty blatant. But I also know that the film does establish that Fritz experienced a terrible tragedy like very early on in the family's life through the death
which I thought was exceptionally important to include.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was almost the most important one because, this was why I asked Sean Durkin about this, was that death happens in 1959 and how much that, like, I could not fathom losing a child at the age of 6 and what that does to you. And like, this is 1959 of a super strong, proud, religious individual that, quite frankly, needed significant help, I would say.
And we both have children under that age. And just to even suggest the thought of that happening is completely unimaginable. It would change both of us forever and everybody we come into contact with forever. So I'm conflicted because at the same time, while I want to blame Fritz for every single thing that happened in this film, I know that that's also a man that's hurting, and that a lot of the actions that he and pressures that he might have put onto not just his family, but on himself for protecting his family were as a result of something terrible that happened to him. So I both feel sympathy for him and I also want to hate him. So by the end of the film, I'm kind of unsettled, and I don't know how you felt coming out of it.
So, and I'm stating this after the last couple of days of going through so much Fritz content, and I'm not trying to make this a shameless promotion, but when you hear, like, it's one, like, we put up the article today, and when you hear the audio version of it with a lot of Fritz's comments, I think it will really hit people too of the kind of individual that Fritz Von Erich was. I do not doubt that this man had a love for his children, but I think he was an incredible motivator, maybe a dangerous one. I don't know if some of his biggest skill sets computed to being a great and loving father, because I think he pushed these children to such lengths. You can see the way his mind worked, that when David died, it was suddenly, now we have an empty slot and now it's time to move Mike in there. Mm-hmm. There is a stunning story that Kevin Von Erich shared. This was when the WWE put out their world-class documentary. Around the same time, a filmmaker named Brian Harrison put out an independent one that you can actually find pretty easily on YouTube. And it's not like the slickest documentary, but I do think it's the better of the two. And and Kevin Von Erich was he participated in it and shared that late in his life. And Kevin says, I blame this completely on Fritz getting brain cancer. He had brain and lung cancer that he died of. And Kevin says that at one point his father told him, you don't have the guts to take your life like your brothers do. And then pulled a gun on Kevin. And again, it's Kevin that, like, think about this. He just says, like, my father went through a lot and I can excuse all of that. It was the cancer talking. Like, he will not say a bad word about his father. And listen to those words. Imagine hearing those words. Imagine uttering those words if you are Fritz. No, I don't think he was a good father. I don't think that he was a healthy individual for these young men to aspire to. And I think they were thrust into an industry that was dangerous enough without having this as someone that was holding such a gigantic expectation level above all of them. And it's pretty chilling when the answer for so many of these sons is to end their lives.
So in reading your research and certainly reading like real life accounts of like, and seeing, like Fritz, put Mike out there for that press conference, I have definitely my opinions about Fritz, the person, the actual human being. But Fritz, the character in the Iron Claw, I'm more conflicted about because we didn't see all those things that you mentioned, John. The most we saw would be him, like, yes, again, ignoring the Kevin's call to help Carrie. It was, him standing at the press conference and basically, giving the indication that he's the one pushing for this.
Telling them that, like, at David's funeral, we don't cry,
Mhm.
which I don't know if that's a true account or not. But to me, even if that doesn't happen, that sentiment, I do think, paints Fritz accurately.
Sure, but
If
not
that
to
was
the
not said, I could see that, like, it's something you could completely believe is something that Fritz would subscribe to.
right. But it's certainly not, like, I think, the damning sort of, like, vilifying act that I would blame somebody for the death, like of their children. So all I'm trying to get at is, John, ignoring maybe, like, what you actually know about the person and just going by the film, what do you think the filmmaker's intent was in characterizing Fritz? Do you think that we were supposed to hate him, or were we supposed to sympathize with him? Because there was a lot more material that they could have put in there to vilify Fritz that for some reason they chose not to.
I went into this. Fritz was actually the character I was the most curious about.
You could argue they could have written a different draft of this story around Fritz. I mean, really is sort of his story, right? Like, starting from Jack and witnessing the deaths of all of his sons.
Well, it was interesting that when the trailer came out, that the trailer really did paint that this was going to be much more of a focus on Fritz, the demanding father. And you remember the big line of the trailer is, everyone knows that Carrie's my favorite, Kevin's number 2, and David's number 3, but the rankings can always change. Like, that was in the trailer for a reason to tell you.
That line got a big laugh in my theater, and
Wow.
I was almost shocked to read in your thing today that was pulled directly from reality. Like, I don't even know if it was meant to be funny. Because
Oh yeah, like Kevin had stated, like he knew, like, who the favorite was, and that. But again, Kevin would always defend and say, "But my father loved us." But he knew, like, they knew that. Like, think about that, like, having a hierarchy of children. I thought they went further with Fritz than I was expecting. My concern was that they were not going to be true to a lot of the darker stuff of Fritz, and that this guy was going to be presented as sort of your, tough but fair. He's like the grouchy old father that it was presented as, like, this lovable, tough guy. And I think that would not have been representative of Fritz, and I think that would have been deceptive. I think a lot of people come out of this, and I can see a lot of people that are fresh to this story putting a lot of the blame on Fritz, that he comes across as callous. That said, they could have gone a lot worse with him, but I think they could have cushioned it more, and I'm glad they did not, because I think that they were more true than I expected. I expected, like, again, that was the character I went in with, like, the most curiosity about.
I don't think they were hard enough on him, simply because I know now, like, so much of the material that they could have drawn from to make it more obvious that about the pressures these children were put through. I don't think they did enough to show Mike's fears of being seen as a David replacement. The only little bit we got was when he was talking to his mom, explicitly telling us that. But because we never got Fritz, for instance, saying it, we never really saw too many other scenes. I don't really feel like it was well built to. And this is more of a criticism of the pacing of the movie itself, because they had so many things to go through. Not only do you have to establish who the Von Erichs were, you have to go through all of these tragedies without giving really enough time to sort of digest the weight of each one, and to really kind of give you the entire context of why Mike might decide to kill himself, for instance.
Yeah, and it's like the thing is, like, and you're right, like, Mike was under just the weight of the world trying to be David, and knew he could not be. And again, I'm watching this, like, just over the last few days, and it's a scene I really remember well, is after David dies, and on the tribute show, they're sitting out by the lake. Fritz is with the sons, and you hear Fritz reflecting on David, and you can just see him, like, the wheels are turning, and he says, "But boy, we're going to miss David, and we love David, but I look at Mike, and he is just the image of David. when I see their baby photos, I can't even tell them apart. It's like, dude, he is literally casting Mike as David as we speak. And this kid is the new David. Like, and this is real. This is a real thing that happened from Fritz's mouth.
That scene you just described and that you wrote about in this piece, I thought would have been perfect to slip in there just to kind of show you these are the expectations.
Because it speaks even louder when you're hearing it from him instead of me writing it.
So this is what I mean when I say like they could have really done a whole lot more to directly correlate Fritz's words and his actions with the direct causes of the deaths of these kids, and that to me was like a bit of a missed opportunity to at least draw you more towards the direction of wanting, like, you should be hating, Fritz.
This, I thought, was a terrible portrayal of Ric Flair. It was, I don't know if this guy had ever watched a Ric Flair promo. I would think he had to.
He certainly had.